The storm that week was relentless, wind howling, rain hammering the old windows like it wanted in. My little apartment sat on a corner of Maple Street, the kind of place where everything creaked and the walls whispered when it rained. I'd moved there after my breakup, telling myself solitude would be healing. It wasn't. It was just quiet. Too quiet. That Tuesday morning, the glass on my living room window finally gave up and cracked under the pressure. I stood there staring at it, coffee in hand, thinking, perfect, just what I needed. I called 3 repair places. No one answered. Apparently, storms made everyone too busy to care. I sighed, sat back down on my worn couch, and wrapped myself tighter in my blanket. I didn't even notice when someone knocked. "Hey, you got a broken window?" The voice was warm, a little rough around the edges. I opened the door, and there stood a man in his 40s, soaked but smiling, holding a small toolbox. I live across the hall. Saw the crack. Figured I'd help before the rain ruins your floor. I hesitated. Strangers and me weren't exactly a good mix lately. But something about his tone was easy, like he wasn't trying to impress or intrude. "Just help." Yeah. "Come in," I said. He introduced himself as Tom, a carpenter, apparently. He pulled out tools and began working quietly, humming to himself. For the first few minutes, I sat awkwardly nearby, not sure what to say. Then he asked, "You just move in?" "Yeah, a few weeks ago." Maple Street's not bad once you get used to it. Bit noisy, but the people are decent. "Good to know," I replied, forcing a small smile. As he worked, we talked, small things at first. Weather, work. Then somehow it slipped out that I'd just gotten out of a long relationship. His hands paused for a moment, then he said, the heartbreak apartment move." "Classic." I laughed, caught off guard. "You've done that too, huh?" "Twice," he said with a grin. "First time, I moved because my ex took the couch. Second time, because I realized she was right too." It wasn't a deep conversation, but it was light in a way I hadn't felt in months. When he finished, he said, "There? Should hold for now. I'll check it again tomorrow after it dries." He left me with a mended window and a strange sense of warmth that had nothing to do with the repaired glass. The next day, he came back, just like he said. We shared coffee that morning, then again the next. It became a quiet rhythm. I'd make 2 mugs without thinking, and he'd show up like the storm had given me a new kind of friendship. By the end of the week, my apartment didn't feel so quiet anymore. It felt alive. One evening, as the sky turned pink, he said, "Sometimes when something breaks, it's not the worst thing. It's just a reason for something better to show up." I nodded, feeling that sentence settle somewhere deep in my chest. He smiled, picked up his empty mug, and said, "See you tomorrow, neighbor." That night, for the first time since my breakup, I slept without waking up halfway through. The wind was still howling, but it didn't sound lonely anymore. The storm passed, but Tom didn't stop showing up. He'd bring muffins sometimes, or just sit with me on the couch while we talked about nothing and everything. He wasn't flirty. He wasn't trying to fill a void. He was just kind. Weeks passed, and one morning he didn't knock. I waited, then made coffee for one again. It felt heavier than it used to. I went across the hall, hesitant, and knocked on his door. No answer. Hours later, I found a small note slipped under my door. Went back to my hometown for a bit. "My sister's unwell. Keep the window closed, or I'll give you hell when I'm back. Tom." I smiled, tracing the messy handwriting. Days turned into weeks. No word. The apartment felt quiet again, but not the same kind of quiet. This one had echoes of warmth in it. One late night, I found myself scrolling through old texts with my ex. Reading them didn't hurt like before, just felt distant. I realized I wasn't waiting for him anymore. I was waiting for better days, for people who meant what they said, like Tom. Then, 2 months later, another knock. "Did you miss me, neighbor?" He was back, same warm grin, same messy hair. He told me his sister was recovering, and before I could say anything, he handed me a paper bag. Inside was a small plant with a note. "You said your place needed more life." It wasn't romance, not yet, but it was something real, something honest. We started spending more evenings together, sitting by that same window, Sometimes we talk about our pasts. Sometimes we just watch the rain. I remember telling him one night, when I first moved here, I thought I'd be alone forever. He looked at me quietly for a moment, then said, "Funny thing about storms, they never leave without washing something clean." That line stuck with me. Years later, when I finally moved again, not to escape heartbreak this time, but to start something new, I took that same window pane with me. Tom helped me carry it out, and when I asked why he looked so serious, he said, "Just making sure you never forget how light gets in." He was right. Sometimes, the people who fix what's broken don't just mend the cracks. They teach you how to stop fearing it. If you made it this far, maybe this story touched something in you too. Take a moment to breathe. And if you'd like more stories like this, calm, comforting, and real, stay with me, because there's always another story waiting for you tomorrow. The first time I saw one of her notes, it was taped to the laundry machine in faded blue ink that almost looked handwritten by a breeze. It said, "Don't forget to clean the lint filter," and "Don't forget to breathe today." I stared at it longer than I should have. Maybe it was just the timing. Maybe I needed to hear those exact words that morning. It was the third week since I'd moved into the apartment building on Willow Avenue. I'd left behind a house filled with echoes of arguments and a relationship that had quietly dissolved long before the goodbye. I didn't realize how empty quiet could be until it became the soundtrack of my life. That day, I stood in the laundry room with my wet clothes and that note, wondering who wrote it. There was no name, no signature, just a heart drawn at the bottom, small and soft, like a whisper someone didn't want to fade completely. A week later, there was another one. "If you're washing something red, do it alone. Some colors stain easy." But beneath that, someone had added in smaller handwriting, "People do too, but they can heal." That one got to me. I smiled, even though no one was there to see it. I started looking forward to laundry days after that. It became a ritual, a reason to leave my apartment, to exist somewhere that wasn't my couch or my thoughts. Sometimes her notes were practical, reminders about detergent or dryer sheets. Other times, they were strange, almost poetic. Don't stare at the spinning cycle too long. You might start thinking about your own. The world won't always thank you for being gentle, but do it anyway. I didn't know her name, but I began to think of her as the laundry poet. One afternoon, I finally met someone in the laundry room. A woman maybe in her late 30s with tired eyes and paint on her hands. She smiled politely when she saw me and said, "Sorry if the machine's noisy. It's been acting up." Her voice was calm, low, like it didn't want to disturb the air. I nodded. "No worries. I've heard worse." We chatted about small things, the landlord, the leaky ceiling, the way the elevator made weird sounds after midnight. Nothing deep, but when she turned to grab her laundry bag, I saw a familiar blue pen sticking out of her back pocket. The same kind of ink from her notes. For some reason, I didn't say anything. Maybe I didn't want to ruin the magic of it. The quiet, invisible kindness of someone who left words for strangers. The next week, another note appeared. Kindness isn't loud. It's in the things no one sees you do. That one made me sit on the washing machine and think. I realized I hadn't been kind to myself in a long time. Not since before my breakup, before I started blaming myself for everything that went wrong. So I wrote back. Just a small sticky note beside hers. "Thanks. Whoever you are, you made my day." I left it there, unsure if she'd see it. 2 days later, when I came back, there was a reply. "You're welcome. It's nice to know someone's reading." That was the first conversation I'd had that week that didn't drain me. From then on, we started talking through notes. She'd leave one, I'd respond. Never with names, never with details, just thoughts. Some were funny, some were heavy, some were just plain strange. Do you ever wish you could fold your feelings as easily as laundry? I wrote back. If only they didn't wrinkle so fast. It went on like that for months. Her handwriting started to feel familiar, like an old friend. I'd imagine her sitting by her window late at night, writing these on little pieces of paper, hoping someone would smile the next morning. Then, one day, I found a note that wasn't like the others. It said, If you don't see any more notes after this week, don't worry. Sometimes people just need a rest. My heart sank. I checked the dryers, the shelves, even the trash bin, as if I could find her hidden there somewhere. Nothing. That was the last note. The laundry room went silent after that. Empty walls. No blue ink. Just machines humming their endless cycles. But something changed in me. I started leaving my own notes. Same kind of paper, same blue pen. Not copies of hers, but little reminders like she gave me. You're doing fine. One bad day doesn't mean a bad life. People started replying, just like I once did. Different handwriting, different colors. The walls slowly filled up again. And for the first time in a long time, I realized the point wasn't to know who she was. The point was that she cared, and that I learned how to do the same. For weeks, the notes in the laundry room multiplied like quiet stars, small glimmers of kindness in a world that rarely stopped to notice. Some were written by people I'd never met. Others were replies to mine. It had become something more than words on paper. It was a conversation between strangers who needed proof that people still cared. But even with all that warmth, I couldn't stop thinking about her. The woman who started it all. The laundry poet. The one whose handwriting I could recognize at a glance. Who was she? Why did she stop? One evening, after a long shift at work, I went down to the laundry room around 9 p.m. It was empty except for the faint buzz of the dryer. I tossed in a small load, sat on the counter, and stared at the blank corkboard on the wall where all the new notes went up. That's when I noticed something. A small piece of paper had slipped behind the detergent shelf, almost hidden. I pulled it out carefully. It was old, creased, and written in that familiar blue ink. It said, "If you're reading this, thank you for being kind back. You made the lonely parts of my life a little less heavy." Underneath, in smaller writing, "Take care of the wall for me." My throat tightened. It felt like finding a goodbye letter months too late. I folded it carefully and tucked it into my pocket. I didn't know what to do with it. Part of me wanted to keep it forever. Part of me wanted to pin it back up where she'd meant it to be. Over the next few days, I started noticing other things around the building. Small traces of her I'd never paid attention to before. A potted plant near the lobby that always had a fresh yellow ribbon tied to it. A stack of magazines in the mailroom, neatly arranged with the newest issue always on top. Even the bulletin board had her handwriting once in a while. Yoga class on Thursday. Though those flyers were months old. It was like she'd been quietly taking care of the building long before I ever moved in. Curiosity turned into something stronger. Maybe obsession, maybe hope. I started asking around casually, not wanting to sound too weird. One evening, I bumped into the old superintendent, Frank, who always smelled like coffee and pipe tobacco. I asked, "Hey, do you know who used to leave those notes in the laundry room?" He looked at me for a moment, his expression softening. "Ah, you mean Marcy." "Marcy," I repeated. He nodded slowly. "Yeah, lived here for almost 20 years, second floor. Sweet lady. She used to leave those little notes everywhere. Laundry room, mail slots, even on the vending machines when they ate someone's quarters." He chuckled quietly, but there was something sad in his voice. "What happened to her?" I asked. He sighed, resting his hands on his tool belt. "She passed away last winter. Cancer. She didn't tell many people. Said she didn't want anyone making a fuss. But she left behind a box of those notes. Told me to keep it somewhere folks could find if they needed a kind word." I stood there completely still. "Do you still have it?" He nodded toward the maintenance closet. "Yeah, it's in there somewhere. Want to see it?" We walked to the closet, and he pulled out a small tin box decorated with faded stickers, hearts, flowers, little words like hope and smile. Inside were dozens of folded slips of paper, each written in that same blue ink. I picked one at random. "You're doing better than you think." Another. "The sun will rise, even if you don't feel ready for it." They all carried her voice, that same gentle warmth I'd grown to look forward to. Frank smiled faintly. "She used to say people don't always need advice. Sometimes they just need a stranger to remind them they're human." I didn't know what to say. My chest ached in that way it does when grief isn't yours but still find a way to sit beside you. That night, I brought the box to the laundry room. I taped one of Marcy's old notes back on the wall. Then another, and another. Soon, the board was full again, like it used to be. People started adding new ones beside hers. It became this living collage of kindness, growing bigger every week. Some were messy, others were typed or drawn on scraps of napkin, but they all felt connected. A few weeks later, I hosted something small in her honor. Nothing official, nothing loud. I just printed out a sign that said, "Community Laundry Night, bring your stories, bring your socks," and taped it near the mailboxes. That Friday evening, a few neighbors showed up, faces I passed in the hallway, but never really talked to. Someone brought cookies, another brought tea. We folded clothes, shared stories, and laughed about the weird quirks of the building. Halfway through, I noticed the woman with paint-stained hands sitting in the corner, smiling softly. "You were the one who replied to her notes first, weren't you?" she asked quietly. I blinked, surprised. "How'd you know?" She chuckled. "Marcy told me about it. She said it made her so happy. She felt like someone was finally talking back." I smiled, feeling my eyes sting. She changed a lot for me. She did that for everyone," the woman said. That was her way of living, leaving warmth behind wherever she could. When everyone left that night, I sat alone in the laundry room, surrounded by the hum of dryers and the soft smell of detergent. The corkboard glowed under the flickering light. Hundreds of notes, hundreds of voices. I thought about how something so small, a slip of paper, a few words, had built a bridge between strangers. Before leaving, I picked up a blue pen and wrote one last note. For Marcy, thank you for reminding us that kindness doesn't need to be seen to matter. Then, at the bottom, I added a small heart. The next morning, someone had drawn a second heart beside it, then a third, and I realized that even though Marcy was gone, her kindness wasn't. It had just changed hands. Now, every Sunday night, I still go to the laundry room. Not because I need to wash clothes, but because it's become something else entirely. A quiet place where kindness lives on. Where people talk without names. Where words feel like warmth. Sometimes when I read a new note that says, "You're not alone," I like to imagine that somewhere, in some peaceful corner of the universe, Marcy is smiling. Watching the kindness she started continue to ripple out like soft, endless waves. If this story made you smile, take a second to like the video, subscribe, and join me for more stories that remind you the world still has gentle people out there. There's a small repair shop at the corner of Willow and Pine, tucked between an old bakery and a forgotten bookstore. Most people walk past it without ever noticing, because the sign hanging above the door doesn't scream for attention. It's just a simple piece of wood with the words "Time Mended Here" carved in faded gold. I only noticed it one afternoon because it started raining and I needed shelter. The bell above the door jingled softly when I stepped inside, and the smell hit me first, that mix of brass polish with dust and something faintly like coffee left on the counter too long. Inside, hundreds of clocks filled the walls. Every shape, every age, from delicate golden pocket watches to towering grandfather clocks that looked like they'd lived 100 years. They all ticked at their own pace, not perfectly in sync, but somehow creating a soft heartbeat that filled the air. Behind the counter sat an old man with round glasses perched at the tip of his nose. He was hunched over a small desk, peering into the open belly of a clock with a magnifying lens. His hands moved slowly but surely, like someone who had spent his entire life making time stand still. He didn't look up when I entered. I hesitated near the doorway. Sorry to barge in. I just needed to wait out the rain. He smiled faintly, eyes still on the gears in front of him. You're not barging in. Everyone needs shelter now and then. I smiled awkwardly and looked around. You fix all these yourself? He nodded. Every one of them has a story. Some are broken because people dropped them, some because people forgot them, and some... He looked up finally, his blue eyes sharper than I expected, because people stopped believing they could still be fixed. There was something heavy about the way he said that. I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded. The rain kept tapping on the window, soft and steady. I sat in a small wooden chair near the counter, and we stayed in silence for a while. After a few minutes, he said quietly, "You look like someone who's lost track of time." I blinked. "What do you mean?" He shrugged lightly. "People who rush usually stare at clocks. People who linger usually avoid them. You've been sitting here for 10 minutes without looking at a single one." I laughed softly. "Maybe I'm just tired of chasing it." "Ah," he said, setting down his tools. "Then you understand time better than most." He stood slowly, moving toward a shelf lined with small wooden boxes. From one of them, he pulled out an old pocket watch, silver, scratched, but beautiful in a quiet way. He held it out to me. "Here, tell me what you hear." I pressed it to my ear. Tick, tick, tick. The sound was soft, rhythmic, steady, like a heartbeat. "It's beautiful," I said. He smiled faintly. "That one belonged to a man who came here after his wife passed. He said it had stopped ticking the day she died." I told him sometimes it's not the clock that stops. It's the reason to keep winding it. He took the watch back gently, setting it on the counter. He came back a month later, said he wanted to give it to someone else who might need it someday. "Did he?" I asked. He nodded. "He did. You're holding it." I stared at the watch again, feeling something warm stir in my chest. "I can't take this," I said quickly. He chuckled softly. "You're not taking it. You're borrowing it. Every clock in this shop belongs to someone who once forgot the sound of hope. They leave them here, and when someone else needs it, I pass it on." I turned the pocket watch over in my hands. The back had a small engraving, "For when you need time to heal." I swallowed hard. "Do you do this often?" He smiled gently. "Every day." We fell silent again. The rain had stopped, but I didn't feel like leaving yet. There was something about that shop that felt like stepping into another world. One where noise didn't exist, and even broken things had a place to belong. After a while, I asked, "How long have you been doing this?" "Since I was 17, he said, sitting back down. "I learned from my father. He told me fixing clocks wasn't about the gears. It was about the patience to believe something small could still matter." I watched him work for a long time. The way his fingers moved, slow, deliberate, respectful, was almost hypnotic. At one point, he looked up and asked softly, "You lost something, didn't you?" I froze. "What makes you say that?" He tilted his head. "People don't come here just to wait for the rain. You came because something in you stopped ticking." I felt my throat tighten. For a second, I wanted to deny it, but something about his voice made lying feel pointless. "My dad passed away 3 months ago," I said quietly. "He used to fix watches as a hobby. I didn't even know how much it meant to him until after he was gone." The man's expression softened. "And now you wish you had learned from him?" "Yeah," I whispered. "Every day." He nodded slowly, then pointed to the pocket watch still in my hand. "Then start with that. Wind it once every morning. Not because you needed to tell time, but because he would have wanted you to keep it moving." I smiled weakly. "You really think something like this helps?" He leaned back, eyes closing for a moment. "When my wife died, I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. I stopped working for almost a year. One day, I picked up a broken clock and realized fixing it was the first time my hand stopped shaking. Sometimes healing doesn't look like forgiveness or closure. Sometimes it just looks like winding a clock." That sentence stayed with me for days after. Before I left, I asked him, "What's your name?" He hesitated, then smiled faintly. "Call me Eli." I nodded, thanking him, and walked back out into the damp afternoon. The city felt different somehow, slower, softer, like I'd been walking through it too fast for too long. That night, I placed the pocket watch on my bedside table. I wound it once, just like he said. Tick, tick, tick. And for the first time since my father's funeral, I slept through the night. Over the next few weeks, I kept visiting Eli's shop. Sometimes I brought him coffee, sometimes just conversation. I noticed how he never rushed anything, not even his sentences. He told me that time was never the enemy. It was only a mirror. "It shows you what you're holding on to," he said once, "and what you still need to let go of." One day, I asked him why he never replaced the flickering light in the corner. He smiled, "Because even broken light still shines." It was such a simple thing to say, but it stuck with me. I began noticing the little details I'd ignored before. The slow spin of the ceiling fan, the way sunlight moved across the floor like it had nowhere else to be. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like life was running away from me. I felt like I could finally stand still long enough to breathe. But then, one Thursday afternoon, I walked into the shop, and Eli wasn't there. The clocks were all ticking, the room exactly the same, but the stool behind the counter was empty. A small envelope sat on the desk with my name on it. My heart sank as I picked it up. Inside was a note in his careful handwriting. Asterisk, dear friend, if you're reading this, it means I've gone where time no longer ticks. Don't be sad. I've had my fill of sunsets. The watch you carry was once mine, before it belonged to anyone else. I leave it to you now to pass on when you find someone who's forgotten how to listen to their own heartbeat. Time doesn't heal everything, but it gives us the space to start again. Keep winding. Eli. Asterisk. I sat there for a long time, surrounded by 1,000 ticking clocks, and cried. Not because he was gone, but because somehow, through his quiet kindness, he'd given me a way to start living again. When I finally left the shop, I carried the pocket watch close to my chest. I didn't know who I'd give it to one day, but I knew I would, because that's what Eli did. He mended time, not by fixing clocks, but by teaching people to hear the rhythm of hope again. After Eli's passing, the little shop at the corner of Willow and Pine stood silent for a while. The open sign faded in the window, and the bell above the door gathered dust. People passed it every day, unaware that the man who had once mended broken timepieces was now just another story carried away by the wind. But I couldn't stay away. Every Saturday, I found myself walking back to that quiet shop, sitting by the window, listening to the lingering rhythm of hundreds of ticking clocks. Somehow they didn't sound lonely. They sounded alive, like they were keeping time for someone who was still learning how to live. The first time I walked in after reading Eli's letter, I felt this strange warmth, as though he was still there somewhere among the ticking. I touched one of the clocks on the wall, an old pendulum piece that used to squeak when it swung, and smiled when I realized it was still perfectly on time. Eli must have known it would keep running long after him. That night, I made myself a promise. I would keep the shop alive, just the way he would have wanted. I had no idea what I was doing, of course. I didn't know the first thing about repairing clocks. But I could clean, organize, and keep the lights on. So that's what I did. For the next few weeks, I started visiting more often, dusting the shelves, straightening the frames, replacing the small closed sign with one that said "Time's still mended here." It felt right. People started noticing again. Not a lot. Just a few curious strangers, the kind who loved the smell of old things and stories hidden in objects. One of them was an elderly woman named Ruth, who walked in one morning with a box in her arms. "This was my husband's," she said softly, opening it to reveal a pocket watch that looked older than both of us. It stopped the day he went into the hospital. I just couldn't bring myself to fix it. I wanted to tell her I wasn't Eli, that I didn't know how to fix anything. But something in her eyes stopped me. "Can I keep it here for a while?" I asked gently. "I can't promise I'll fix it, but I can make sure it's safe." She smiled through her tears. "That's all I need." I placed it in the glass case next to Eli's workbench. The next morning, when I opened the shop again, I could have sworn I heard a faint tick. Maybe it was my imagination. Maybe it wasn't. A few days later, a young boy came in, maybe 9 or 10 years old. He looked nervous, clutching a small clock shaped like a cat, its tail swinging like a pendulum. "My mom said it's broken," he said, "but she used to say it made her laugh when she was sad. Can you make it work again?" I knelt down to his level and smiled. "I can try." He grinned and ran back to his mom waiting outside. I put the little cat clock on the counter, staring at it for a long time. When I opened the back, I found one loose spring. It took me hours and a dozen wrong turns, but eventually I managed to wind it back in place. When it started ticking again, I actually laughed out loud. The boy came back the next day, and when I showed him, his face lit up like sunlight after a storm. "It's working," he shouted. "Yeah," I said softly. It just needed someone to believe it still could. That line sounded familiar. It was something Eli once said to me. That's when I realized maybe this was how it worked. Maybe we carry the voices of people we've lost inside us, and they speak through us when we do something they would have loved. Weeks turned into months, and slowly, the shop became a small secret sanctuary again. People would wander in, tell their stories, and leave behind their broken watches, music boxes, and clocks. Some I managed to fix, others I just cleaned up and left as they were. But every one of them carried a piece of someone's memory. Sometimes I'd write their stories down in a little notebook. I called it the Book of Time. One of my favorite entries was about a woman who brought a metronome from her piano. She said her daughter used to play music every evening before she passed away, and the metronome had stopped that same night. I wound it up gently, and when it clicked again, steady, reliable, she closed her eyes and cried. She didn't thank me. She didn't need to. Another entry was about a man who brought his father's broken watch, but never came back for it. I waited for months, and one day, I decided to wear it myself. Somehow, it always felt like it was waiting for someone to keep it going. That's how the shop worked. People left pieces of their lives here, and somehow, they all kept each other alive. One rainy afternoon, the kind that reminded me of the first day, I met Eli. I was sitting at his old workbench, polishing a clock that hadn't ticked in years. The bell above the door jingled, and a young woman stepped in. She had that same lost look I must have had when I first came here. Quiet, tired, carrying something invisible but heavy. "Hi," she said softly. "Are you the one who fixes clocks?" I smiled faintly. "Sometimes. Depends on the clock." She laughed weakly and set a small gold wristwatch on the counter. It belonged to my dad. It stopped a few months ago. He used to wear it every day. I froze. The watch looked so much like the one my father had. I nodded slowly. "Would you like to wait while I take a look?" She nodded and sat by the window. As I worked, I found myself remembering the first time I held a screwdriver in my dad's workshop. He used to say, "The secret isn't in knowing what's broken. It's in not being afraid to touch it." And just like that, I saw what was wrong. A tiny spring had slipped loose. I fixed it, wounded, and listened. Tick, tick, tick. When I handed it back, she covered her mouth and whispered, "It's alive again." I smiled. "So are you." Tears filled her eyes, but she laughed through them. "Thank you." Before leaving, she looked around the shop and said, "This place feels like a heartbeat." That night, after closing up, I stood in the middle of the shop and just listened, 1,000 tiny heartbeats surrounding me. A year later, I hung a new sign beneath the original one. It read, "In memory of Eli, the man who fixed clocks," and underneath, in smaller letters, "Time doesn't heal everything, but it gives us the space to start again." Every time I looked at it, I felt something settle inside me, a quiet peace that didn't need words. Life kept moving, as it always does. Seasons changed, faces came and went, but the shop remained, a tiny pulse of hope tucked between a bakery and a bookstore, keeping time for the people who forgot how to. And one day, when a young man ran into the shop, drenched from the rain, clutching a broken watch and saying he just needed somewhere to wait, I smiled, handed him a towel, and said the same thing Eli once said to me. "You're not barging in. Everyone needs shelter now and then." And when he looked around in wonder, eyes wide at the hundreds of ticking clocks, I knew the cycle was starting again. Sometimes late at night, when I close up and stand in the doorway, I still talk to Eli. I tell him about the people who come in, the stories they share, the time they're learning to heal from. And even though I never hear a reply, the clocks always seem to tick a little louder in those moments, like they're answering for him. Because time may move on, but kindness echoes forever. So if you ever find yourself walking down Willow and Pine, and you see a little shop with a flickering light and a sign that says "Time mended here," stop for a while. You might just find a rhythm you've been missing. And maybe, if you listen closely, you'll hear it too. That steady, gentle heartbeat reminding you that healing doesn't happen all at once. It happens one tick at a time. If this story brought you peace, Stay with me for more calm, heartfelt tales that help you unwind, breathe, and remember that the world still holds quiet kindness. The porch light from my grandmother's house had never gone out, not once in 40 years. It didn't matter if there was a thunderstorm outside, if the power went out across the neighborhood, or if the bulb itself had lived well past its age. Somehow, it always stayed on. And for as long as I can remember, she used to say, "That light's not just for me, sweetheart. It's for anyone who's lost and needs to find their way back home." When I was a kid, I didn't understand what she meant. I thought she was just being sentimental. But after everything that happened this year, the divorce, the loneliness, the way I lost myself in a city that felt too big and too cold, I think I finally do. The night I came back home, the light was still burning. It was late, almost midnight, and the highway behind me stretched for miles. The air smelled like rain, and the only sound was the hum of crickets and the faint buzz of that same porch bulb. My grandmother had passed away 6 months earlier. Her house sat empty, untouched, as though time had stopped the day she left. I've been meaning to come back, to clean things up, to do the responsible grandchild thing. But I couldn't. Not until now. Something about that night pulled me here, like the light itself was calling me. I parked by the gravel driveway, stepped out, and stared at the porch. There was still glowing that soft amber hue, swaying a little with the wind. I couldn't help but smile through the ache in my chest. "Hey, Grandma," I whispered. Yes, I found my way back. Inside, the house smelled like old wood and lavender soap, her scent still clinging to every corner. The furniture was covered with white sheets, but I could see the familiar shapes underneath. Her rocking chair, her sewing table, the small bookshelf by the window where she kept her favorite novels. I walked to the kitchen, turned on the sink, and was half surprised when water came out. The clock on the wall had stopped, 6:17. I didn't bother winding it again. I wandered room to room, touching things I hadn't seen in years. A faded photo of me and her in front of the porch swing. A half-finished scarf she'd been knitting last winter. A jar of peach preserves on the counter, labeled in her neat handwriting. And then, sitting on the table by the window, I found it, her old letter tin. It was one of those small, rectangular metal boxes covered in flowers. She used to keep everything in it, recipe cards, old photographs, the kind of letters that no one writes anymore. I lifted the lid and found a bundle of envelopes tied with twine. The top one had my name on it. My heart skipped. The envelope was yellowed, the ink a little faded, but her handwriting was clear. "For when you come home." I sat down slowly, the wood creaking beneath me, and opened it. "My dearest Ellie," the letter began, "if you're reading this, it means you finally made it back home. I hope it's because you needed a place to rest, not because the world broke your heart again. But even if it did, that's all right. This old house is strong enough to hold you while you mend." I swallowed hard, already blinking through tears. "You've always been my little dreamer," she went on. "You ran out into the world with your heart wide open, and that's both your greatest gift and your biggest stake. But I need you to remember something. You can always come back. There is no shame in returning to the place that loved you first. And if the world gets too loud, too sharp, too heavy, go sit on the porch. Let the light keep you company. It has never failed me, and it won't fail you either." She ended it with her usual sign-off, "With love that doesn't fade, Grandma." I pressed the letter to my chest and closed my eyes. I could almost hear her humming from the kitchen, the sound of her slippers brushing across the floor. That night, I didn't bother unpacking. I just sat on the porch swing, wrapped in an old quilt, watching that light. It flickered once, just once, and my heart stopped for a second. But then it steadied again, glowing warm and sure. And I swear, for the briefest moment, I felt her beside me. Not as a ghost, not as something spooky or unreal, just the presence of someone who'd loved me enough to leave behind something that couldn't die. I whispered, "I missed you," into the night, and the light seemed to pulse just slightly brighter. Maybe it was the wind, or maybe it was her saying she missed me too. In the morning, sunlight spilled across the porch. The world outside was quiet, peaceful. I made myself coffee in the same old chipped mug she always used. It still had the words "Good Morning, Sunshine" printed on the side, though the paint had faded with time. I took my cup out to the porch and sat again in that same spot. Across the street, Mrs. Hanley, the old neighbor, was watering her garden. She looked up and froze when she saw me. "Ellie," she called out, hand shading her eyes. I smiled. "Hey, Mrs. Hanley." She set her watering can down and hurried over, her face lighting up. "Well, I'll be. I haven't seen you since." "Since the funeral," I said quietly. Her smile softened. "Your grandma would be so happy to see you here. She left me a letter," I said I could come back when I needed to. "That sounds just like her," Mrs. Hanley chuckled. "She used to tell everyone that light of hers was for the lost souls. Even said it once kept a traveler from sleeping in his car during a storm." I raised an eyebrow. "Really?" "Oh, sure," she nodded. "Came knocking on her door one night. Soaked to the bone. Said he saw her porch light from the road and figured someone kind must live there." I laughed softly. That sounded exactly like something she'd do. She gave him tea, a blanket, and sent him off in the morning with one of her famous biscuits, she said. Told him, "Keep driving, son, and remember, there's always a light somewhere." The warmth in my chest spread, steady and soft, like the light itself was glowing inside me now. Later that day, I started cleaning the house. I opened all the windows to let in the fresh air, swept the floors, and took down the white sheets covering the furniture. Each time I pulled one off, dust floated up in soft clouds, catching the light like memories. By evening, the place already felt a little more alive. I lit one of her old candles, made some tea, and sat by the window again. I thought about how she'd always keep the kettle warm, even when no one was visiting. She said, "You never know when someone might need a cup." That line stuck with me as I looked around the cozy, half-forgotten house. Maybe that was what she'd been doing all along, keeping something warm for whoever might need it next. Maybe now that was my turn. Just as the sun began to dip, I heard a car pull up outside. My heart jumped. No one ever came out here anymore. I peeked through the curtain and saw a small red hatchback. The driver's door opened, and a man stepped out, looking around awkwardly. He was in his 30s maybe, with tired eyes and a jacket too thin for the weather. He hesitated before walking up to the porch. Hi," he said when he noticed me at the door. "Sorry to bother you, but my car's overheating." I saw the light on and thought maybe someone could help. The words hit me. I saw the light on. I smiled gently. "You came to the right place." He seemed relieved. "Oh, thank God. I thought this house might be abandoned." "Not anymore," I said, stepping aside. "Come on in. There's tea on the stove." He introduced himself as Daniel, a schoolteacher heading home from visiting his parents 2 towns over. His car had started smoking near the bend, and he'd pulled over just before it gave up completely. We sat at the kitchen table, sipping tea from mismatched mugs, the same ones my grandma used to use. "This place feels," he paused, looking around, "safe. I don't know how to explain it." I smiled softly. "That's kind of what it was built for." He nodded, looking at the old photographs on the wall. "Was this your grandmother's house?" "Yeah," I said, tracing the rim of my mug. "She passed last year, but she left it and the porch light for anyone who needed to find their way." He looked thoughtful. "That's beautiful." I shrugged, smiling. "It's home." Outside, the light flickered once again. Just once. Then it steadied, glowing brighter than ever. And for the first time in months, I felt something I hadn't in a long, long time. Peace. While I walked back into the cafe the next morning, the first thing I noticed was the smell of cinnamon rolls. Warm, sweet, like the kind my grandma used to bake when I was little. I froze near the counter because Mia was already there, wearing that same green cardigan she always wore on Sundays. She looked up, and for a second, our eyes met. "Morning," she said softly, almost testing the word. "Morning," I replied, unsure if we were pretending yesterday's moment never happened or silently agreeing it did. She slid a coffee cup toward me, the same mug she'd used yesterday, with a tiny chip on the handle. "You left this," she said. I looked down. She was right. My old pen sat beside it. "Oh, thanks." We stood there for a second too long, both unsure what to do next. Then she broke the silence. "Want to sit for a bit?" And that was how our Sunday morning ritual began. Every Sunday after that, I'd find myself walking to the cafe at the same time. She'd already be there, sketching something on her notebook, and I'd bring the same brand of cinnamon rolls from the bakery across the street, because she once told me hers were always too dry. We never talked about heavy things, not right away. Mostly about the sky, the people passing by, her art, my dog. It felt peaceful, but every now and then, there was a shadow behind her smile. I saw it when her phone buzzed, and she quickly flipped it face down. One morning, I asked, "Everything okay?" She hesitated. Then she nodded. "Just complicated." I didn't push. Weeks went by, and our quiet mornings became the only part of the week that didn't feel heavy. She'd talk about how she missed the sea, how she used to draw waves for hours when she lived by the coast. I'd tell her about my grandmother's garden, the one place that always smelled like peace. It was all small things, but they meant more than I realized. Then one Sunday, she didn't show up. Her usual chair was empty. Her coffee mug wasn't on the counter. I waited, checked my phone even though I didn't have her number, and after half an hour, left a note under her favorite napkin holder. "Hope you're okay." She came back a week later, eyes tired, sleeves hiding faint bruises. "Mia," he whispered, stepping closer. "What happened?" She smiled, that same small, gentle smile, and said, "I left." "Left who?" She didn't answer, but the look in her eyes said enough. We sat down quietly, and I didn't ask any more questions. She sipped her coffee, looked at the window, and said, "You ever feel like you've been living in someone else's story? Like you were just a side character?" I nodded slowly. "Yeah, but the good part is you can always start writing your own." Something about that sentence made her exhale like she'd been holding her breath for months. "I think I'm trying," she said. After that day, she stopped hiding her wrists. She started wearing bright colors again. She laughed more. One morning, she handed me one of her sketches, a drawing of the cafe, sunlight pouring through the windows, two figures sitting by the corner table. "This is us," she said. I still keep that drawing. Months later, when I had to move away for a new job, we promised to stay in touch. But life happened. Messages became fewer, calls shorter, until one day there were none. I thought maybe that was it, a chapter closed. But then, 2 years later, I got a small envelope in the mail. No return address. Inside was a sketch of the ocean, waves curling around 2 mugs on a cafe table. Underneath, she'd written, "You helped me find myself again." That was the last thing I ever heard from her. But sometimes when I walk past a small cafe, I still look inside, just in case. Because some people don't stay forever. They just pass through your life to remind you what peace feels like. And maybe that's enough. I thought love was supposed to make everything easier. Turns out, it can break you quietly, one promise at a time. That was the line I kept repeating in my head after everything ended. 3 years ago, I met Ryan in the most unexpected way, during a power outage at a bookstore. We were both reaching for the same novel, the kind of cheesy romance story that I'd never admit I liked. When the lights went out, I remember hearing him laugh softly, saying, "Well, guess fate wanted us to share it." And that was how it started, with laughter in the dark. Ryan had that kind of presence that made everything feel lighter. He wasn't loud or overly confident. He was warm in the way sunlight hits your skin on a winter morning. He remembered small things, the way I took my coffee, my favorite playlist, how I used to hum when I was nervous. We started dating a week later. By the 3rd date, I knew I was falling for him. By the 3rd month, I was already imagining our future. But love doesn't always show its cracks right away. At first, it was little things, him canceling plans because he was tired, the way he started taking longer to reply to messages. I told myself it was normal. People get busy. I didn't want to be the clingy girlfriend. Then came the excuses. He'd say, "I just need space," or "You're overthinking again." And I believed him, because when you love someone, You learn to justify their silence. One night, I decided to surprise him at his apartment with dinner, his favorite pasta, the one I used to make whenever he had bad days. I waited outside for almost 10 minutes, holding the food in my hands, before realizing his car wasn't there. When he finally came home hours later, I saw a lipstick mark on his collar, not mine. He looked guilty the moment he saw me. "Who is she?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He froze, then sighed. "It's not what it looks like, but it was. It always is. We fought." I cried. He apologized, not because he meant it, but because he didn't want to lose control of the situation. And I did what I never thought I'd do. I forgave him, because the thought of being without him hurt more than the betrayal itself. We stayed together, but something in me changed. I stopped telling him about my day. I stopped waiting for good morning texts. I started sleeping on the edge of the bed. And every time he said, "I love you," I felt a knot in my chest because part of me knew he didn't mean it anymore. Months passed like that, me pretending to be okay, him pretending to care. Until one day, I saw her, the same girl from the lipstick stain, at the grocery store, holding his hand like it belonged there. When she saw me, she froze. He didn't. He just stood there, silent, cowardly. That was the moment I realized he'd already moved on. He just hadn't told me yet. I left without saying a word. I didn't scream, didn't throw things, didn't make a scene. I just walked away, heart shattering with every step. That night, I sat in the dark of my apartment, staring at my reflection. My eyes were swollen, my hands shaking, but for the first time in months, I felt something new, relief. Because when the person who's supposed to love you the most is the one who keeps breaking you, letting go isn't the hardest part. Staying is. The next morning, I packed everything that reminded me of him, photos, letters, the scarf he left behind, and put it all in a box. I didn't burn it. I didn't throw it away. I just put it on the highest shelf where I couldn't reach it easily. For weeks, I felt like a ghost, going through motions, pretending to laugh at work, smiling when people asked if I was okay. But every night, the silence got louder. Then one evening, my best friend Maya called. "You need to get out of that apartment," she said. "Let's do something spontaneous." I almost said no, but something inside me whispered yes. We ended up driving to the beach. No plan, no bags, just two broken people trying to remember what freedom felt like. The waves were cold, the wind strong, but I hadn't laughed that hard in months. At one point, Maya turned to me and said, "You know what's funny? You look more alive now than you ever did when you were with him." And she was right. I started doing small things again, painting, baking, reading. I didn't check his social media, didn't stalk the girl, didn't try to find answers. Because deep down, I knew I'd never get the closure I wanted. Sometimes, closure isn't a conversation. It's waking up one morning and realizing you didn't think about them before your coffee. But just when I thought I was finally healing, Ryan texted me. It was late, around midnight. Just one message. "I miss you." My heart stopped. For a second, I thought maybe he meant it. Maybe he finally realized what he lost. But then I remembered every night I cried while he slept peacefully beside me. Every time he made me feel small just to keep himself comfortable. I didn't reply. Instead, I turned off my phone, lay down, and whispered to myself, "You're doing fine. You're free now." It wasn't the end, but it was the first time I felt like the beginning of something new. 2 weeks passed after that midnight text, and I didn't hear from Ryan again. Not a call, not a message, not even a like on my social media. It was like he'd thrown that line out just to see if I'd bite. And when I didn't, he disappeared again. But this time, his silence didn't hurt the same way. It felt like peace. I started journaling, not about him, but about myself. Every morning before work, I'd write one small thing I was proud of. Some days it was as simple as, "I got out of bed before 9. Other days, "I didn't cry today." Healing didn't come in waves. It came in slow ripples that barely touched the surface until one day I looked around and realized I could breathe again. A few months later, something unexpected happened. I met someone new. His name was Ethan. We met through mutual friends at a coffee shop, and he had that kind of energy that was the exact opposite of Ryan's. grounded, calm, genuine. The first thing he ever said to me was, "You have the kind of smile that looks like it took work to rebuild." That line stayed with me. At first, I didn't want to open up. I told myself I wasn't ready. But Ethan never rushed me. He didn't push. He didn't ask for more than I could give. He just showed up consistently. We talk about music, life, random things like how people forget to appreciate sunsets. He'd listen, really listen. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I had to earn someone's attention. But healing isn't linear. One night, after a dinner out, he reached for my hand across the table, and I froze. My heart raced like I'd done something wrong. It wasn't him, it was me. My mind had been trained to associate affection with fear. He noticed immediately. Ethan pulled back slightly and said softly, "Hey, you don't have to force anything. I'm not him." That broke something in me, but in a good way. For weeks after that, I started noticing how differently Ethan treated me. He didn't make me question my worth. He didn't disappear when I needed reassurance. He didn't make me feel like loving me was an inconvenience. And slowly, I began to let him in. There was this one evening that still stays clear in my memory. We were sitting on a rooftop, watching the city lights flicker, when Ethan said, "You know what's wild? People talk about love like it's supposed to be this huge, chaotic thing. But I think real love just feels quiet, like exhaling." That was the first time I realized how exhausting my past love had been. How much energy I'd poured into keeping something alive that was already dead. Ryan had loved me like a storm. Intense, unpredictable, destructive. Ethan loved me like sunlight, steady, patient, warm. But just when I thought my story had finally shifted toward peace, the past decided to test me again. One evening, as I was leaving work, I saw Ryan standing outside the building. My stomach dropped. He looked exactly the same. That same confident stance, that familiar smirk that used to make my heart skip. But now it just made me tired. He walked up and said, "You look good. Been a while." I crossed my arms. "What are you doing here, Ryan?" He shrugged. "I just wanted to talk. I've been thinking a lot about us." Us. That word used to mean everything. Now it felt empty. "I'm not interested in revisiting that," I said calmly. He sighed. "Come on, don't be like that. You know I messed up, but we had something real." I looked at him for a long moment. Then I said something I've been holding back for months. "Yeah, we did. But real doesn't mean healthy. Real doesn't mean it was right." He looked taken aback. Maybe he thought I'd still be the same girl. The one who cried and forgave and begged him to stay. But she was gone. "I'm seeing someone," I added quietly. That seemed to hit him harder than anything else. "So that's it? You moved on?" "Yes," I said. "And you should too." He stared at me for a long time, like he was trying to find something familiar in my eyes. Then he just nodded. "I hope he treats you better than I did." "He already does," I said, and walked away. When I got home that night, I sat on my bed and felt this overwhelming wave of calm wash over me. It wasn't pride. It wasn't revenge. It was closure, the kind that doesn't come from them saying sorry, but from you realizing you don't need it anymore. Weeks turned into months again, and life became beautiful in its simplicity. Ethan and I grew closer, but what I cherished most wasn't the romance. It was the friendship underneath. There were days we just sit in silence, watching old movies, our hands brushing occasionally, and I'd feel that quiet kind of joy that comes from safety. One evening, as we were walking home from a late dinner, he said something that stayed with me forever. You know, he said, "People think love is about finding someone who completes them, but I think it's about finding someone who reminds you you were already whole." And I smiled because that was exactly what he did. A year later, I ran into Maya again, my best friend who dragged me to the beach that one night. She laughed when she saw me, saying, "I can't believe how far you've come. Remember when you swore you'd never trust anyone again?" I laughed too. "Yeah, but sometimes healing finds you when you're not looking." That night, when I got home, I looked at that old box I'd put on the shelf, the one full of Ryan's memories. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel anger or sadness when I looked at it, just gratitude, because every mistake, every heartbreak, Every tear had led me exactly here, to peace, to love, to myself. So I took that box, opened it one last time, and whispered, "Thank you for the lessons." Then, gently, I threw it away. And as the lid closed, so did that chapter of my life. Love had broken me once, but it had also taught me how to rebuild, stronger, wiser, softer. And maybe that's what love is supposed to do. Not save you, but show you that you were capable of saving yourself all along. If you made it this far, thank you for listening. It means more than you think. If you enjoyed this story, stay with me. There are more quiet, heartfelt stories waiting for you. So stick around, take a deep breath, and let's keep healing one story at a time. It started with a voicemail I wasn't supposed to hear. I left my phone on the kitchen counter while I showered. When I came back, I noticed the screen lit up one new message. It was from his phone, my boyfriend, Dylan, the one I'd been with for almost 4 years. I wasn't suspicious at first. We trusted each other, or at least I thought we did. But when I pressed play, the world stopped. "Hey babe," a woman's voice whispered, low and sweet. "Last night was perfect. I can't stop thinking about it. Don't forget to delete this." "Okay." Delete this. That one phrase echoed in my head over and over again as I stood there dripping water onto the floor, still wrapped in a towel. My chest tightened, my stomach churned, and my hand started shaking so badly I almost dropped the phone. I must have replayed that message 10 times before it fully sank in. He cheated. The man who said he wanted to marry me. The man who told my mom he couldn't imagine life without me. The man who looked me in the eyes every night and said, "I love you." For a few minutes, I couldn't move. It felt like everything around me blurred, like my house wasn't mine anymore, like my heartbeat wasn't mine either. Then, slowly, the anger crept in. Not the loud, screaming kind, the quiet, heavy kind that fills every inch of you until you're ready to explode. That's when I realized something. He didn't know I knew, and that gave me time. When Dylan got home that evening, he kissed my cheek like nothing had happened. "Hey babe," he said, throwing his jacket on the chair. "How was work?" I smiled. "Good. You?" "Busy," he said, sighing. "Meetings all day." "I'm dead." "Meetings, right?" I played along, cooked dinner, laughed at his stupid stories, and watched as he scrolled through his phone while sitting next to me. Every time the screen lit up, my stomach twisted. Was it her? I didn't confront him that night, or the next. Instead, I started paying attention to every word, every glance, every excuse. He started staying late at work more often. His phone, which used to sit charging on the nightstand, was now glued to his hand. He began showering as soon as he got home, something he'd never done before. The signs were all there. I just hadn't wanted to see them. 2 weeks later, I finally found her name, Kara. He left his laptop open one morning before work, and when I sat down to check my emails, his messages popped up. The thread was right there, sitting in plain sight. "Can't stop thinking about you," he'd written. "You make everything else feel so easy." Everything else. That everything else was me. I didn't even cry that time. I just stared at the screen, reading their messages until the words stopped meaning anything. They talked about movies, about coffee, about next weekend. I saw the photo. Her hand holding his, their fingers laced together. It felt like someone had punched me in the chest. That night, when he came home, I was calm. Too calm. I made him dinner again. He smiled, poured wine, told me a story about his client meeting. I nodded, pretending I was listening, while inside, something hardened. After dinner, I said, "I found your laptop open today." He froze, just for a second, but it was enough. "What do you mean?" he asked, setting his glass down. I said slowly, "You really should log out before you leave. Someone might see your messages." The color drained from his face. "Messages?" "Yeah," I said, tilting my head. "From Kara." He didn't speak. He didn't deny it, didn't even try. Just sat there staring at me, his jaw tight, his eyes darting like he was searching for the right lie. Finally, he whispered, "It's not what you think." I laughed, actually laughed. You know what's funny? Everyone always says that when it's exactly what we think. He opened his mouth, but I stopped him. Don't. I don't want your excuses. I just want the truth. How long? He hesitated. A few months. Months, I repeated. So, while we were apartment hunting, while you were talking about kids, while my mom was helping us plan a trip for Christmas, you were with her? He looked down. It wasn't supposed to happen. Right, I said. Cheating never is. It just happens. We sat in silence for a long time after that. The kind of silence that feels like it's screaming. Then he said something I'll never forget. I love you, you know. It just got complicated. That sentence broke whatever was left of me. Complicated, I repeated, standing up. Dylan, love isn't complicated. People make it complicated. You made it complicated when you lied. He tried to reach for me, but I stepped back. Don't. He sighed. I don't want to lose you. You already did, I said. That night, I packed a small bag. Just enough clothes to last me a week. He didn't stop me. Maybe he knew he couldn't. As I stood by the door, he said quietly, "You're really leaving?" "Yes," I said. "And this time, don't bother deleting anything. I've already heard it all." I walked out. For the first time in years, the air felt sharp and clean. Cold, but freeing. I didn't cry until I got to my car. Then everything hit me at once. The love, the betrayal, the wasted time. I drove to my sister's place across town. She didn't ask questions, just opened the door, saw my face, and hugged me. For the next few days, I barely spoke. I went through the motions: eat, sleep, repeat. My sister tried to cheer me up, but my mind kept looping back to every memory, every "I love you," every plan we'd made. Until one morning, I woke up, looked at my reflection, and whispered, "You can't stay stuck here." So I didn't. I started running again, something I'd stopped doing years ago. I signed up for an art class, took long drives by myself, and slowly, painfully, began to remember who I was before him. But healing isn't just about forgetting. It's about forgiving yourself for what you didn't know. Weeks later, I got a message from him. Just one line: "I miss you." I didn't reply, because for once, I didn't owe anyone closure but myself. And maybe, just maybe, that was the first real step toward moving on. The morning sunlight crept through the curtains, casting a soft glow across the kitchen. I woke up to the sound of the coffee machine and the faint hum of the refrigerator. For a second, it felt like everything was normal again, like those months of silence and distance between me and my wife, Amber, were just a bad dream. But then reality hit, and the ache in my chest returned like a wave crashing into shore. Amber was sitting at the table, wearing one of my old sweatshirts, stirring her coffee slowly, as if she were deep in thought. I took a seat across from her, unsure if I should say good morning or just sit there and let the silence speak for us. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked, her tone gentle but tired. "Not really," I admitted. Kept thinking about everything. She nodded slowly, eyes fixed on the steam rising from her mug. "Me too. 4 weeks now. We had been dancing around the truth, avoiding the big conversations, pretending that we could fix things by just coexisting in the same house. But the truth was heavy, sitting between us like a shadow we couldn't escape. I took a deep breath. "Amber, we can't keep doing this. We can't keep pretending everything's fine when it's not." She looked up at me, her eyes glossy but determined. "I know, but I don't know how to stop." That's what broke me the most, how honest she sounded. We weren't angry anymore. We were just tired. Tired of fighting. Tired of pretending. Tired of not knowing what came next. I reached across the table, brushing her hand lightly. "Do you still love me?" Her lips trembled before she whispered, "I do, but I don't know if it's the same kind of love anymore." The words hit like a knife. It wasn't cruel. It was real. The kind of honesty that hurts more because it's spoken softly. I looked down, my throat tightening. "Then what do we do?" She hesitated. "Maybe we stop trying to fix something that isn't broken. It's just changed. Maybe we find out who we are without trying to hold on to what we used to be." That's when I realized it wasn't about anger or betrayal or blame anymore. It was about growing apart. Two people who once fit perfectly but somehow drifted in different directions without even noticing. We spent the rest of that day in silence. Not the painful kind, but the understanding kind. She packed a small bag that evening. No jilling, no tears, just a quiet acceptance. When she stood by the door, I asked softly, "Where will you go?" "I'm not sure yet," she said. "Maybe to my sister's for a bit. I just need time to think." She stepped closer, pressing her forehead against mine for one last moment. "You'll always be my favorite person," she whispered before walking away. The door clicked shut, and for the first time in months, I didn't chase after her. I just stood there, surrounded by memories that felt both too heavy and too fragile to touch. Days turned into weeks. The silence in the house became my new normal. But I didn't fill it with distractions. I let it teach me. I learned to sit with my thoughts, to understand the version of me that existed without her. And slowly, painfully, that silence began to feel less like punishment and more like peace. One afternoon, I found an envelope in the mail. No return address, just my name written in her handwriting. Inside was a letter that started with, "I hope you're okay." She wrote about how she was living near the coast now, how she'd wake up to the sound of the ocean and think of how I used to love that sound. She said she wasn't sure if she missed us or just the way we were, but she was grateful for everything we had shared. At the end, she wrote something that stuck with me. Maybe love isn't about holding on forever. Maybe it's about knowing when to let go and still wishing each other peace. I folded the letter carefully and placed it inside a drawer where I kept our old photos. And for the first time, I smiled. Not because I was over her, but because I finally understood what it meant to love without needing to possess. Months later, I took a trip to the same coastal town she mentioned. Not to find her, but to feel that peace for myself. I walked along the beach, the waves crashing gently against the sand, and realized that sometimes the hardest goodbyes are the ones that set us free. I didn't know if our paths would ever cross again, but deep down, I knew she was okay. And that was enough. Life didn't end when she left. It changed. And maybe that's the quiet beauty of heartbreak. It teaches you how to start again, softer, wiser, and stronger. Before I left the beach, I whispered into the wind, "Thank you, Amber, for everything." And as the sun dipped below the horizon, I smiled, knowing this was not the end, just the beginning of another version of peace. If you've ever loved and lost, remember this. Sometimes the most beautiful thing you can do for love is to let it rest gently in the past and keep moving toward your own sunrise. Stay here with me for more stories like this one, where love hurts, heals, and finds peace again. I never expected to find his handwriting again. It had been 6 years since Daniel and I last spoke, 6 quiet, heavy years where I convinced myself I was finally over him. But when that letter showed up in my mailbox with his name in the corner, everything I had buried started clawing its way back to the surface. The weird part? It wasn't even mailed recently. The paper was yellowed, the ink slightly faded, and the postmark was dated 3 years ago. I sat on the couch, staring at it like it might vanish if I blinked. My fingers trembled as I slid my thumb under the flap. Inside was a single folded sheet, written in his messy cursive that always tilted too far to the right. If you're reading this, I guess I didn't have the courage to send it back then. That was the first line. I could barely breathe. He went on to talk about how sorry he was, about how leaving that night was the worst mistake he ever made, about how he thought time would heal both of us, but it only made him realize how much he lost. I read every word like it was written yesterday. He said he hoped I'd found someone who treated me better than he did. He hoped I was happy. And at the bottom, there was one last sentence that didn't even sound like him. If you ever think of me again, just know I never stopped thinking of you. I don't remember crying, but when I looked down, my tears had smudged the ink. The next few days were a blur. I kept that letter on a nightstand like some fragile thing I wasn't ready to let go of. Every night before I fell asleep, I reread parts of it, trying to find new meaning in his words. My friends told me to throw it away, that reopening that chapter would only hurt me again. But something about it felt unfinished. Daniel and I met in college. He was that quiet guy who sat at the back of the lecture hall, sketching in his notebook instead of taking notes. I was the type who couldn't stop asking questions. We were opposites, he calm and steady, me restless and loud. Maybe that's why it worked for a while. We lasted 5 years before it all fell apart. The breakup wasn't explosive, it was slow and quiet, like a candle burning itself out. He wanted to move to another city for work, and I wanted to stay near my mom, who was battling cancer at the time. We fought, we made up, we promised we'd figure it out. But deep down, we both knew neither of us was going to change our minds. The last night we saw each other, we stood in the kitchen, surrounded by half-packed boxes. He looked at me like he was memorizing every detail. My hair, my face, the chipped blue mug I held. Then he said, maybe in another lifetime. I laughed it off, but the moment he closed the door, I collapsed. I told myself that was it. That real love sometimes just wasn't enough. But that letter messed everything up again. I started searching for him online. It felt wrong at first, like reopening a wound that had already scarred over. But curiosity won. His number was disconnected, his old social media accounts were inactive, and when I called a mutual friend, she told me he'd moved somewhere near Portland. That was all she knew. For days, I debated sending something back, maybe a letter of my own. I even drafted one. It started with, I don't know if this will ever reach you, but I got your message. And I'm still here, but I couldn't bring myself to send it. Every time I thought about it, my chest tightened. What if he'd moved on? What if he didn't even remember writing that letter? Then something strange happened. One morning, I went to get coffee from the cafe down the street, the same one we used to go to every Sunday, and the barista handed me a small brown envelope. She said, a guy dropped this off for you yesterday. Said you'd know who it's from. There was no name on it, just my first initial. Inside was a photo. It was a picture of the bridge near our old apartment, the one we used to walk across at sunset. On the back, he'd written 2 words, still waiting. My heart stopped. I looked around, scanning every face on the street like maybe he was there watching me. But no one stood out. My hands were shaking so bad I nearly dropped my coffee. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat by the window for hours, the photo clutched in my hand, thinking about all the times I tried to move on. Every date that didn't go anywhere. Every time I told myself I didn't miss him. The truth was I never stopped. I just learned how to live with the emptiness. And now he was back, at least kind of. I started going to that same cafe every morning, hoping he'd walk in. A week passed, then 2, nothing. But on the 10th day, I saw a man sitting near the window, a cup of coffee in front of him, sketching in a notebook. It was him. Daniel looked older, more tired maybe, but it was still him. He saw me before I could even decide what to do. Our eyes met and time just paused. He smiled softly, like we were picking up a conversation we'd left mid-sentence years ago. Hey, he said, standing up slowly. My throat went dry. Hey, we just stood there, awkward and quiet, surrounded by people who had no idea they were witnessing 2 timelines colliding. He gestured toward the chair across from him. Still take your coffee the same way? He asked. I nodded. Somehow my voice found its way back. Still can't spell my name right on the cup, huh? He laughed. That same low, familiar laugh that used to make everything feel okay. For the next hour, we just talked. About life, work, his move, my mom. It was strange, comfortable, but also bittersweet. Like coming home to a house you no longer live in. When he finally said he should go, I didn't want him to. Neither of us said goodbye. That night, I reread the old letter again. But this time, I noticed something I hadn't before. Tiny faded ink marks near the edge like water spots. Maybe they were tears. Maybe his. And I wondered if he still felt the same way I did. After that day at the cafe, I couldn't stop thinking about it. It was like I had stepped into a dream that refused to end. Every sound, every corner of the city suddenly felt familiar again, as if his presence had brought everything back to life. For a few days, we texted. Just small things, how our days were going, what we were watching, what we missed from the past. It was cautious, gentle, like 2 people trying to remember how to walk after years of forgetting. Then one night, he texted, can we meet again? There's something I didn't say. I stared at the screen for a full minute before replying. When? Tomorrow night. At the bridge. That same bridge from the picture. The one from the note that said still waiting. When I got there, the sky was bruised with streaks of pink and gold. The air was heavy, the kind that makes every word feel louder. Daniel was already there, leaning against the railing, hands in his pockets, staring at the water below. He didn't turn around when he said, "I didn't mean for the letter to reach you like that." I stepped closer. How did it even end up in my mailbox? He finally looked at me. I sent it years ago. Then I panicked and asked a friend to pull it from the mailroom before it was delivered. I didn't want to drag you back into my mess. So how? He smiled sadly. Guess she never threw it out. Silence settled between us, soft and familiar. Why now? I asked. Why come back after all this time? He took a deep breath, his voice trembling slightly. Because I never stopped thinking about you. Every time I moved, every time I tried to start over, it always felt like something was missing. I thought time would make it fade, but it didn't. I just learned how to live with missing you. My throat tightened. I'd spent years trying to bury that exact same ache. I don't know what you want me to say, I whispered. Say you hate me if you have to, he said quietly. Say you moved on. I just needed you to know I still care. I looked at him, and all the anger I thought I had melted into something else, something softer, sadder. I never hated you, I said. I just hated that you left. He nodded. I deserve that. We stood there, side by side, watching the last bit of sunlight disappear behind the city skyline. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't dramatic. It was real. Two people standing in the quiet aftermath of everything that had broken them. After a long pause, he said, "Do you remember that night before graduation? The one where we promised we'd find each other again, no matter what." I laughed under my breath. "You mean the one where you made me pinky swear in the middle of the rain?" "Yeah," he said, smiling softly. "That one." He looked down, his voice low. "I think I've been trying to keep that promise ever since." That was the moment I realized something. We weren't the same people anymore. The version of us that existed back then couldn't come back. But maybe a new one could. The weeks that followed were strange but beautiful. We started meeting up again, sometimes for coffee, sometimes just to walk and talk about nothing. We didn't call it dating. We didn't call it anything. We were just two people trying to find a way back to each other without breaking what little was left. One afternoon, I invited him over for dinner. The same apartment I'd once cried in for months after he left. He brought flowers, sunflowers, my favorite. The gesture was small, but it hit harder than he probably realized. Dinner was simple, pasta, wine, awkward laughter. But halfway through, I caught him looking at me like he used to, that quiet, patient gaze that made time slow down. "You still hum when you cook," he said softly. I smiled. "And you still talk too much when you're nervous." He laughed, shaking his head. "Guess some things don't change. But a lot of things had. The way I loved, the way I forgave, the way I understood him. We had both been hurt and both grown because of it." After dinner, he helped me wash the dishes, and for a moment, everything felt like it used to. Comfortable, safe, real. But this time, I wasn't waiting for the other shoe to drop. When he left that night, he hugged me, a long, quiet hug that said everything words couldn't. "I don't know what happens next," he said softly. "Neither do I admitted. But maybe we don't have to know." He smiled. "Maybe that's enough." Months passed. We didn't rush into labels or promises. We just existed in each other's lives again, naturally, like two threads slowly finding their way back into the same pattern. But there was one night that changed everything again. It was late, and it started raining, hard. The kind of rain that drowns out the world. I was sitting by the window when my phone buzzed. "Daniel, come outside." I ran downstairs, drenched by the time I reached the gate. He was standing there with an umbrella in one hand and something small in the other. An envelope. "Not another letter," I said, half laughing. "This one's different." He handed it to me. Inside was a drawing of the two of us sitting by the bridge, hand in hand, with the caption "Still waiting, but not for long." He looked at me, eyes glistening. I'm done waiting for another lifetime. I want this one with you. My breath caught. There were no big speeches, no cinematic music. Just him, rain, and that look that once broke me and was now healing me. I stepped closer, took his face in my hands, and kissed him, the kind of kiss that felt like coming home after a storm. He whispered against my lips, "You have no idea how long I've wanted this." I smiled. 6 years. I counted. We both laughed, holding onto each other as the rain kept falling, washing away everything that had kept us apart. From that night on, we stopped running from the past. We stopped pretending we didn't care. And even though not every day was perfect, there was peace, the kind that comes from choosing each other again, even after everything. Months later, while packing for a trip together, I found the original letter again, the one that started it all. I slipped it into a small frame and placed it on our shelf. Because sometimes closure doesn't come when you move on. It comes when you decide to open the door again. If you made it this far, thank you for listening to my story. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe because every night I'll be here sharing more calm, emotional stories that feel like this one, soft, real, and made for you. The morning of my birthday started out like any other. No balloons, no texts, no surprise breakfast in bed. Just the hum of the coffee maker and the same quiet apartment walls that had been listening to me for years. I wasn't expecting fireworks, but I was expecting something. A simple happy birthday from the person I'd spent the last 4 years loving didn't seem like too much to ask. Ryan, my boyfriend, was in the kitchen scrolling through his phone while eating cereal straight out of the box. I waited, sipping my coffee, hoping he'd glance up and smile, maybe even mention it. Nothing. "Morning," I said, forcing a smile. He looked up, grinned a little, and said, "Hey, you're up early." That was it. Not even a hint that today was supposed to mean something. "Yeah," I said, trying not to sound disappointed. "Couldn't sleep much." He nodded, eyes back on his phone. "You okay?" "Yeah, fiending." He kissed my forehead, half distracted before heading to work. "I'll be home late tonight. Big project due tomorrow." "Don't wait up." The door shut behind him, and the silence hit harder than it should have. I sat there for a long time, staring at the steam from my coffee until it disappeared. We'd had rough patches before, months where he seemed distant or too busy, but he'd never forgotten my birthday. At first, I tried to convince myself maybe he had something planned for later. Maybe he was pretending to forget to surprise me that evening. That's what I told myself while I went to work, checked my phone every hour, and smiled through meetings even though my heart was heavy. By lunchtime, I got a message from my mom. "Happy birthday, sweetheart. Hope Ryan's spoiling you today, red heart." I stared at it for a minute before replying. He's planning something, I think smiling face with smiling eyes emoji. I hated lying, but somehow it felt easier than admitting the truth. That maybe he just didn't care anymore. After work, I stopped by the bakery we used to visit when we first started dating. I bought a small slice of my favorite cake, thinking maybe he'd come home early and we'd share it. By the time 8 p.m. rolled around, the lights were still off and the apartment was still empty. At 9:12, I got a text. "Sorry, running late. Don't wait up, just order something." No emoji, no heart, nothing. I put my phone down and stared at the cake on the counter. I thought about all the little things I'd done for his birthdays, the decorations, the notes, the dinners I'd spent hours planning, and how this time, all I got was a text message. It wasn't about the birthday. It was about what it meant. That the person who once made me feel like I was everything in his world had slowly started treating me like I was just another thing on his to-do list. That night, I didn't cry. I just felt numb. The next morning, I woke up to an empty bed and a note on the counter. Went to work early. Love you. Love you. 2 words that felt like they were written out of habit, not feeling. I tried to shake it off. I went for a walk, cleared my head, even bought myself flowers, because if no one else was going to celebrate me, I damn well would. But later that evening, something happened that made everything click. When I came home, I noticed a notification on the TV. Ryan's Netflix account was still logged in. I clicked it out of boredom, but one of the recently watched titles caught my eye. The Perfect Date. And beneath it, watched 2 hours ago. He hadn't been at work late. He'd been watching movies. Alone. My stomach dropped. I wasn't even mad, just tired. I sat there for a while, staring at the blank TV screen, wondering when exactly I stopped being a priority. The following weekend, I decided to talk to him. Not fight, not accuse, just talk. When he came home that evening, I said, "Can we have dinner together tonight?" He looked surprised but nodded. "Sure, what's up?" We ate quietly for a while before I finally said, "You forgot my birthday." He froze mid-bite. "What? You forgot?" I said softly. "It was 2 days ago." His eyes widened for a second before guilt washed over his face. "Oh my God. I'm so sorry, Mia. Work's been crazy and—" "I know." I interrupted. "You've been busy. You're always busy." He put his fork down. "That's not fair." "No," I said, voice steady but low. "What's not fair is feeling like I'm invisible in my own relationship." He sighed, rubbing his temples. "I didn't mean to hurt you." "I know you didn't," I said. "But you did." For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. The only sound was the quiet hum of the fridge and the faint rain tapping against the window. "I've been trying," he said finally. "I know I mess up, but I love you, okay? I just get caught up." I nodded. "I believe you, but love shouldn't always feel like waiting." That night, we didn't argue. We didn't hug, either. We just sat on opposite sides of the couch, two people still together, but miles apart. And in that silence, something inside me shifted. It wasn't anger. It was realization that sometimes love doesn't end with shouting or betrayal. Sometimes it fades quietly, one forgotten birthday at a time. The next morning, he left early again. But before going to work, he texted me, "Dinner tonight. I owe you." I stared at the message for a while. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was genuine. I couldn't tell anymore. But I said yes. That night, I dressed up. Nothing fancy, just enough to remind myself that I still mattered, even if it wasn't to him. When I got to the restaurant, he was already there, waiting with flowers. He smiled when he saw me, and for a moment, I almost believed things could go back to how they were. He ordered wine, cracked a few jokes, tried to fill the air with laughter. But halfway through dinner, I noticed he kept checking his phone, again and again. And that's when I saw it. The screen lit up, and a message popped up from someone named Lila. "Can't wait for tomorrow, red heart." My stomach dropped. He didn't notice that I saw. He just smiled, trying to keep the conversation going like nothing was wrong. I forced a smile back, but inside I knew this wasn't just about a forgotten birthday anymore. It was about something deeper, something that I'd been building for months. And I was finally ready to face it. When the morning light filtered softly through the curtains, Emma woke to the gentle sound of waves crashing on the beach outside. The house was silent, except for the rhythmic call of seagulls. For a moment, she forgot everything. The fight, the crying, the long hours of silence. Then the memories flooded back, and her chest tightened. She reached for her phone and hesitated. There were no new messages from Noah. She told herself she wouldn't check, wouldn't cave first, but the ache of missing him gnawed at her resolve. They had been together for almost 3 years. 3 years of laughter, road trips, cozy nights, and tiny arguments that always ended with a soft apology. But last night had been different. Last night, something cracked. It started with a misunderstanding, a text she saw on his phone. It wasn't even incriminating, just a message from his coworker that read, "Had a great time last night. Thanks again for the drink." Her heart had twisted instantly. She'd asked, voice trembling, "What does she mean by that?" Noah had looked confused. "Emma, it's nothing. We were all out after work." It wasn't just us. But Emma's trust had already faltered. Maybe it was because they'd been arguing so much lately. Maybe it was because of the distance that had grown between them, the one they never talked about. "You didn't tell me," she'd whispered. "You didn't even mention going out." "I forgot," he'd said, rubbing his temple. "I didn't think it was a big deal." But to her it was, because in a relationship, it wasn't the huge betrayals that broke you. It was the small secrets, the forgotten mentions, the missing reassurances. That night, she told him maybe they needed space. And for the first time, he hadn't argued. He'd simply nodded, said okay, and left. Now, lying in bed, Emma stared at the ceiling and felt the dull ache of regret creep in. She wanted to text him. She wanted to say I'm sorry. I overreacted. I love you. But her pride held her back. Meanwhile, across town, Noah sat at his kitchen table, nursing a cup of cold coffee. He hadn't slept much. His mind kept replaying their argument, every word echoing like a wound that wouldn't close. He wasn't angry at Emma. He understood why she felt hurt, but he also felt tired. Tired of always being the one to fix things. He scrolled through old photos on his phone. Their first trip together, their messy pancake breakfasts, her sleepy smile in the mornings. Every image made his heart ache. Finally, he opened the chat window and typed, "I miss you." Then he erased it. Instead, he set the phone down and whispered to himself, "If she wants space, I'll give her space." Days passed. Neither of them reached out. Each morning, Emma looked at her phone, hoping for a message that never came. Each night, Noah debated calling her, but something stopped him. They were both caught in the same loop, missing each other, waiting for the other to break first. On the fifth day, Emma decided to go for a walk along the beach. The wind tugged at her hair, and the ocean stretched endlessly before her. She closed her eyes and breathed deeply, trying to calm the storm inside. Then she saw it, a small cafe on the corner she hadn't noticed before. On impulse, she walked in and ordered a latte. She sat by the window, staring out at the sea. And as she sipped her coffee, she realized something. She wasn't angry anymore. She was just scared. Scared of losing someone who still meant everything. Scared of being the first to reach out and be met with silence. Her fingers trembled as she unlocked her phone. She hesitated for a long moment, then typed, "Hey, I've been thinking about you." She hit send before she could stop herself. Minutes felt like hours as she stared at the screen. The typing bubble appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then finally, "I've been thinking about you too." Tears welled in her eyes. She smiled for the first time in days. They talked for hours that night. It wasn't perfect. There were awkward pauses, moments of hesitation, but it was honest. They both admitted where they went wrong. She confessed her insecurities. He admitted he should have communicated better. And by the end of the call, something shifted. The walls they'd built began to crumble, replaced by something softer, more real. A week later, they met in person at that same beach cafe. Noah walked in wearing that same worn-out jacket Emma always teased him about. When their eyes met, her heart skipped a beat. He looked tired but hopeful. "Hey," she said softly. "Hey," he replied, smiling faintly. "You look good." "You too." They sat down, and for a moment, neither spoke. Then Emma reached across the table and took his hand. "I don't want to lose you," she said quietly. "Not over something like this." "You won't," he promised. "But we've got to stop hurting each other over fears we never talk about." She nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. "I know. I'll do better. So will I." They talked for hours about everything and nothing. About love, fear, trust, and how easy it is to take the small things for granted. By sunset, they were walking along the beach, hands intertwined, letting the silence speak for them. That night, Emma realized something important. Love isn't about never fighting. It's about finding your way back to each other after every storm. And this time, she wasn't going to let go so easily. Because love, real love, wasn't about perfection. It was about showing up even when it hurt. Before falling asleep, Emma whispered into the quiet night, "Thank you for staying." And somewhere across the bed, Noah murmured, half asleep, "Always." The waves outside whispered softly against the shore, carrying with them the promise of a fresh start. If you felt something while listening, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Your support helps these comforting stories reach more hearts. So stay, listen, and fall asleep with another beautiful story tomorrow night. The rain had been falling since morning, soft and steady, the kind that made the world feel slower, quieter, and more honest. Claire sat by her apartment window, tracing raindrops as they slid down the glass. She always found comfort in rainy days. Something about them made her feel less alone. Her phone buzzed beside her, and she glanced at the screen. It was a message from Ethan. "Can we talk?" Just 3 words, but they hit harder than they should have. She hadn't spoken to him in weeks. Not since the breakup. Not since the night they both said things that couldn't be taken back. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. She typed, "I don't think so," then deleted it. Typed, "What about?" then deleted that too. Finally, she locked her phone and leaned back against the wall, closing her eyes. They had been together for 2 years. 2 full years of memories she couldn't erase even if she wanted to. The late-night drives, the early morning coffees, the way he'd always pull her closer when she was cold. He wasn't just a boyfriend. He had been her home. But things had changed slowly, like a slow leak in a boat you don't notice until you're sinking. It started when he got his new job. He'd been excited, nervous, full of energy. Claire had been proud. She'd encouraged him every step of the way. But soon, the job started taking more of him than he had to give. Late nights turned into later mornings. Texts went unanswered. Plans got postponed. At first, she understood. Everyone gets busy, but the loneliness started to feel heavier each day. She'd sit at dinner, waiting for him to show up, staring at her phone until the food went cold. When he finally came home, he'd kiss her forehead and say, "Sorry, long day," before collapsing into bed. It wasn't just the missed dinners. It was the distance that crept into their hearts. She'd started to wonder if maybe he didn't need her anymore. And the moment you start wondering that, everything starts to crumble. One night, she confronted him. "Do you even notice me anymore?" she'd asked, voice shaking. Ethan had looked exhausted, his tie loose, his eyes bloodshot. "Claire, not this again. I'm just tired, okay?" "Tired?" she snapped. "You're always tired. I feel like I'm dating your voicemail." He sighed, rubbing his face. "I'm doing this for us. For our future. You know that. But I don't want a future where you're never here." He'd paused then, long enough for her to know he didn't have an answer. The fight had gone on for hours. Words they didn't mean, accusations they didn't intend. And at some point, she'd said it. "Maybe we should just take a break." She didn't mean it, not really. But he didn't argue. He just nodded. And that silence, that awful, hollow silence, had been louder than any fight they'd ever had. That was 3 weeks ago. Now here she was, staring at the rain, wondering if he was missing her or if he'd already moved on. Her phone buzzed again. Another message. "Please, just one conversation." She stared at the screen for a long time, her heart pounding. Against her better judgment, she typed, "Fine, just talk." 10 minutes later, there was a knock at her door. She froze. She hadn't expected him to come in person. For a second, she debated not answering. But then, curiosity and something deeper made her move. When she opened the door, he was standing there, drenched from the rain, hair sticking to his forehead. He looked the same, yet somehow completely different. Older, tired, softer. "Hey," he said quietly. "Hey." They stood there awkwardly for a moment before she stepped aside. "Kumein." He hesitated, then entered. The smell of her lavender candles hit him immediately, familiar and warm. It made his chest ache. "Do you want a towel?" she asked, grabbing one from the counter. He nodded. "Thanks." She handed it to him, careful not to let their fingers touch. "So, what do you want to talk about?" she asked, sitting down on the couch, her tone guarded. Ethan looked at her for a long moment before speaking. I couldn't stop thinking about you." Claire swallowed hard. "You could have fooled me." He sighed. "I deserve that. I know I wasn't there, Claire. I got caught up in everything. The job, the pressure. I thought I was doing the right thing, but I was losing you in the process." Her voice softened, but only slightly. "You didn't lose me because of your job, Ethan. You lost me because you stopped trying." He flinched at that. "You're right." For a long time, neither spoke. The rain filled the silence between them. Finally, he said, "I don't want to keep pretending that what we had doesn't matter." "It does. It always will." Claire looked down, blinking back tears. Then why did it feel like I was the only one fighting for it? I didn't realize how much I was taking you for granted until you were gone, he said softly. You were always the calm in my chaos. I forgot how much I needed that. She let out a shaky laugh. You say that now. But what happens when work gets crazy again? When the next project takes all your time? You'll disappear again, Ethan. You always do. I won't, he said firmly. I've made changes. I'm learning how to balance it. And I don't want to do any of it without you. Claire looked into his eyes, and for the first time in weeks, she saw the man she fell in love with. Not the tired stranger who'd stopped showing up, but the one who used to make her laugh. The one who'd once danced with her in the kitchen at midnight for no reason. Her heart ached. I don't know if it's that simple. It's not, he said, but maybe we can start small. Coffee, talking, just being in the same room again. She hesitated, torn between logic and longing. Every part of her wanted to believe him, to trust that this time would be different. But her heart had learned the hard way not to fall too easily. I'll think about it, she said quietly. He nodded, accepting that it was the most he could hope for right now. I'll wait, he whispered. When he left, she closed the door and leaned against it, her chest tight. The rain was still falling outside, but it didn't feel as lonely anymore. She didn't know what would happen next, whether this was the start of something new or just a goodbye said too late. But for the first time since their breakup, she felt something she hadn't felt in weeks, hope. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough for now. The next morning, Claire woke up to sunlight streaming through her curtains. The first clear morning after days of rain. For a moment, she lay still, eyes half open, the memory of Ethan standing at her door replaying in her mind like a dream she wasn't sure had really happened. She reached for her phone on the nightstand and saw a text waiting for her. Ethan, good morning. Hope you slept okay. Thank you for letting me talk last night. She smiled faintly, her thumb hovering over the keyboard. She typed, you're welcome, but deleted it. Then she tried, I did. You. And deleted that too. Eventually, she just locked her phone again and rolled out of bed. It was too soon. Her heart still felt raw, too bruised to start pretending that things could go back to normal. The day went by in a blur. A grocery run, a quick call with her mom, a long walk through the park near her apartment. Everywhere she went, it felt like the world was reminding her of him. The cafe where they used to grab coffee every Sunday morning. The bookstore where he once surprised her with a signed copy of her favorite novel. Even the park bench where they sat that one night, talking about the future like it was a promise written in stone. By the time evening came, she couldn't take it anymore. She pulled out her phone again, staring at his message until her chest ached. Then she finally typed, I slept okay. You. A minute later, he replied, didn't sleep much. Kept thinking about you. She felt her heartbeat quicken. Ethan, she typed, but before she could finish, another message came in. Can I see you again? No pressure, just coffee. Like before, Claire hesitated. She told herself she needed time. Time to think, time to heal. But something inside her whispered that maybe the healing she needed wasn't about avoiding him. Maybe it was about facing what they still had left. Okay, she finally typed. Tomorrow morning. When she walked into their old cafe the next day, Ethan was already there, sitting at their usual table, 2 coffees in front of him, one black and one caramel latte with extra foam, just the way she liked it. He stood when he saw her, his nervous smile both awkward and endearing. Hey, she said softly, taking the seat across from him. For a while, neither spoke. The air was filled with the soft hum of chatter, the clinking of cups, and the smell of roasted beans. It felt almost normal, like no time had passed at all. Then Ethan broke the silence. I've been going to therapy. That caught her off guard. You have. He nodded. Yeah, work stress, burnout, and honestly, trying to figure out why I let myself push you away. My therapist said something that stuck with me. She leaned forward. What did they say? That love isn't supposed to feel like another job you clock into. It's supposed to be your reason to breathe easier. Claire's chest tightened. That's actually really beautiful. He smiled faintly. I spent so long trying to build a future that I forgot to live in the present with you. I thought success meant proving I could handle everything on my own. But all I did was prove I couldn't handle losing you. She looked down at her cup, tracing the rim with her finger. You really hurt me, Ethan. I know, he said quietly. And I don't expect you to just forgive me overnight. I just wanted you to know that I'm trying to be better. For me, and maybe someday, for us again. Claire exhaled slowly. She wanted to believe him. Part of her already did. But another part, the cautious part, remembered every lonely night, every unanswered call, every time she cried herself to sleep wondering if he still cared. I'm scared, she admitted softly. So am I, he replied. But I'd rather be scared trying again with you than be safe without you. She looked up at him, her eyes glossy. You still remember what you said the first night we met? He grinned. At the party? When I spilled wine on your shoes. She laughed despite herself. Yeah, you said, if I ruin them, I owe you dinner. And then you made me buy you sushi even though you said you hated fish. Only because you wouldn't stop smiling at me like an idiot. He laughed too, shaking his head. God, I missed this. For a moment, everything felt light again. Easy, like maybe the storm they went through had finally started to clear. They talked for nearly 2 hours about work, life, everything in between. When it was time to leave, Ethan walked her to her car. The air outside was crisp, the kind that carried the faint smell of coffee and wet leaves. As she unlocked her door, he said softly, Claire, can I ask you something? She turned, heart thudding. What? Would it be okay if I called you tonight? Just to talk. She hesitated, then nodded. Yeah, I'd like that. That night, they talked for hours, not about the past, but about small things. The kind of conversations that felt effortless, where laughter slipped in between pauses and everything felt calm again. Over the next few weeks, they started seeing each other more often. Not as a couple, but as two people rebuilding something fragile. Trust. There were still moments of hesitation, of doubt, but there were also moments that reminded Claire of why she loved him in the first place. He didn't rush her. He didn't push. He simply showed up every single time. One evening, they were sitting by the lake where they used to walk after work. The sun was setting, painting the sky in soft oranges and pinks. Ethan tossed a pebble into the water, watching the ripples fade. Do you ever think, he said quietly, that some people are just meant to find each other again? Claire smiled faintly. Maybe, but I also think it takes both people wanting it at the same time. He nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. And do we? She looked at him, the reflection of the sunset in his eyes. I think we might. He reached for her hand, slowly, hesitantly. And this time, she didn't pull away. Their fingers intertwined naturally like they always had. For the first time in months, she didn't feel broken. She felt whole, not because everything was fixed, but because they were both finally trying to fix it together. The days that followed were different, lighter. They went for morning walks, cooked dinner together, talked about their mistakes, and laughed at how awkward it was to start over. It wasn't perfect, nothing ever is, but it was real. One night, as they sat on her couch watching an old movie, Ethan turned to her and said, You know what I realized? What? That love isn't about never breaking. It's about finding the courage to rebuild when you do. She smiled softly. You've gotten wiser. Therapy, he said with a grin. And losing you. She rested her head on his shoulder, the world finally quiet around them. Then maybe losing me wasn't the end. Maybe it was the beginning of something better. He kissed the top of her head. I think so too. The credits rolled. The room dim except for the flickering light from the TV. Outside, it started to rain again, but this time it didn't sound sad. It sounded peaceful. Claire closed her eyes, listening to the soft rhythm of the rain, the warmth of Ethan beside her, and a quiet realization that maybe, just maybe, second chances weren't a sign of weakness, but of love's strength. Because sometimes the people who drift apart are the same ones who find their way back. Not because they have to, but because they still choose to. And that kind of love, the one that survives the storm, is worth everything. If this story touched your heart, don't leave just yet. Take a deep breath, hit that subscribe button, and stay for the next story. There's always another quiet moment waiting to remind you that love, hope, and healing still exist. The first time Lily met Aaron, he was standing in the rain outside a tiny bookstore, holding a drenched box of books like it was something sacred. She had just gotten off work, exhausted, umbrella half broken, and there he was, this tall, slightly awkward guy trying to shield paperbacks from the downpour with a jacket. She laughed and said, "You know, they sell plastic bags for that." He looked up, water dripping from his hair, and smiled. "Yeah, but that'd make it too easy, wouldn't it?" That was how it started, a small, accidental moment that somehow became everything. They started talking that day. She helped him carry the books to his car. He offered to buy her coffee as a thank you, and what was supposed to be 10 minutes turned into 2 hours. They found out they both loved the same obscure author, the same late-night radio host, and that they both secretly hated small talk but loved deep conversations that lasted until 2 a.m. Within weeks, they were inseparable. Aaron had this quiet, steady energy that grounded Lily's restless heart. He was the kind of person who noticed small things, like how she always hummed before she fell asleep, or how she got cold hands when she was nervous. She, on the other hand, brought color into his world. She'd drag him out for sunrise drives, force him to dance in grocery store aisles, or leave sticky notes around his apartment with tiny doodles and notes like "drink water, dummy." Everyone around them used to say they balanced each other perfectly, and maybe they did, until life started to get complicated. Aaron got promoted at his job, a big deal for him. It meant longer hours, more travel, and more pressure. At first, Lily was proud. She'd text him good luck before meetings, stay up late waiting for his calls, and even pack him snacks before his flights. But slowly, the little things started to change. He'd forget to text her goodnight. Then he started canceling their Friday movie nights. And before long, she realized she'd gone from being his favorite part of the day to just another part of his schedule. One night, she was waiting at their favorite diner, the one with the flickering neon sign and the smell of pancakes that somehow felt like comfort when she got a text. "Aaron, sorry, can't make it tonight. Meeting ran late." Rain? Check. She stared at it for a while, the waitress refilling her coffee for the third time. She typed back, "Sure," with a smiley face that didn't feel real. When she got home, she sat on the couch staring at the empty spot next to her, wondering how something that once felt so alive could start to fade without either of them meaning to. The weeks that followed blurred together. Work, texts that came hours late, phone calls that sounded rushed. She started to feel like she was losing him in slow motion, one unread message at a time. Then came the night that broke her heart. It was her birthday. Aaron had promised he'd be home early. She'd spent the whole day cooking his favorite meal, lighting candles, even putting on the old playlist they made together when they first moved in. 8 o'clock came, 9, then 10. No message, no call. When she finally heard the door open, she felt a flood of relief until she saw his face. He looked guilty, exhausted, and there was a lipstick stain on his collar. Lily froze. "Whose is that?" Aaron blinked, confused at first, then followed her gaze. His face paled. "Lily, it's not." "Don't," she cut in, her voice trembling. "Don't lie to me. It was just, I swear it wasn't what it looks like." "Oh, it looks like you were too busy to come home because you were with someone else." He stepped closer, his voice breaking. "It was a co-worker. We had drinks after the meeting." She leaned in. "It was nothing." "Nothing," she whispered, "because it sure doesn't feel like nothing." He reached for her hand, but she stepped back. "Lily, please. You know I'd never hurt you like that. It was one stupid moment. You didn't stop her," she said quietly. The silence between them was deafening. Aaron dropped his gaze, shame flickering in his eyes. "No, I didn't. That was it. That was the moment something inside her broke." She didn't scream, didn't cry. She just nodded slowly, walked past him, and went to the bedroom. When she came back, she was holding a small overnight bag. "Lily, please don't do this." he said desperately. It didn't mean anything. She looked at him, really looked at him, and all she saw was the man who had once promised her forever, but couldn't even keep his hands to himself for one night. It meant enough, she whispered, because it made me realize you stopped fighting for us a long time ago. And with that, she walked out. The next few weeks were unbearable. She stayed with her best friend, tried to pretend she was okay, but everything around her felt wrong. The coffee didn't taste the same. Her mornings felt too quiet. The bed felt too big. Erin tried to reach out, texts, calls, voicemails. She deleted them all, because every word felt like a reminder of something she couldn't trust anymore. Until one morning, she found a letter in her mailbox. It wasn't a text. It wasn't an email. It was an actual handwritten letter from Erin. Her hand shook as she opened it. Lily, I don't know how to fix what I broke. I just know I'd give anything to try. I keep replaying that night in my head, and the truth is, you're right. I stopped fighting. I got lost trying to be everything for everyone except the one person who mattered most. You told me once that love isn't about grand gestures. It's about showing up, and I failed you there. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just hope that when you think of me, it's not only as the man who hurt you, but also the one who never stopped loving you, even when he forgot how to show it. Erin, Lily read it 3 times. Then she folded it carefully, placed it back in the envelope, and stared out the window. Her chest felt heavy, not just with sadness, but with something deeper. Because as much as he had broken her heart, she couldn't bring herself to hate him. That night, she sat in bed staring at her phone, debating whether to call him. Her finger hovered over his name. But before she could press it, another message appeared. Erin, I'm moving next week. I just wanted to say goodbye properly. One last coffee. Her breath caught. She typed back before she could stop herself. Same place. Always. She sighed, whispering to herself. Once more can't hurt. But she had no idea that meeting would change everything again in ways she never expected. Lily hadn't been back to that little cafe since the breakup. The bell above the door still jingled the same way when she walked in, and the smell of roasted coffee beans hit her like a memory she wasn't ready for. Every corner of the place held pieces of them. The table near the window where they had their first real date. The couch in the corner where she once fell asleep with her head on his shoulder. The counter where he used to sneak extra sugar into her latte, even though she swore she liked it just a little bitter. She walked in slowly, scanning the room until she saw him. Erin was already there. Same dark jacket, same nervous half-smile, but he looked different. Tired, maybe, or just older in a way that pain makes you older. He stood up when he saw her, like he didn't quite believe she'd actually come. Hey, he said softly. Hey. They sat down. The silence between them felt heavier than it used to. He finally spoke. You look good. She gave a faint smile. Thanks. You too. He laughed a little, that awkward, sad kind of laugh that fills the spaces where love used to live. I didn't think you'd come. Neither did I, she admitted. The waiter came over, and they both ordered the same thing they always used to. Caramel latte for her, black coffee for him. Old habits, it seemed, died slower than love. For a few minutes, they didn't say anything. Just the sound of cups clinking and quiet chatter around them. Then Erin took a deep breath. I meant what I wrote in that letter. Lily looked down at her hands. I know. I wasn't lying to you that night, Lily. There was no affair. No secret relationship. Just a stupid mistake. One I'll regret for the rest of my life. I believe you, she said quietly. He blinked, surprised. You do? Yeah, she said, meeting his eyes. I believe you didn't mean for it to happen. But that doesn't make it hurt less. Erin's jaw tightened. I know. I just wish I could undo it. She gave a sad smile. If only life worked like that. He leaned forward slightly. Do you ever think about us? Every day, she said without hesitation. But not in the way you think. He frowned. What do you mean? I think about how much we grew together. How happy we were. But I also think about how much I lost trying to keep us alive when we were already falling apart. Erin looked down. You didn't lose me because you stopped loving me. No, she said softly. I lost you because you stopped choosing me. The words hit him hard because they were true. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The sound of the espresso machine filled the silence like static in the background of an unfinished goodbye. Then Aaron sighed. I've been going to therapy. Lily blinked. Really? He nodded. Yeah, I had to face some things. About myself. About how I handle pressure, love, guilt, everything. Turns out, I'm not great at holding on to the things that matter until they're gone. She looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the sincerity in his eyes. The regret, the humility, the effort. That's good, she said finally. I'm glad you're doing that. He smiled weakly. The therapist asked me once if I want to fix things with you, if I had the chance. I told her yes. Every single time. Lily took a slow breath. And what did she say? She said maybe what I want isn't what you need anymore. That made her heart ache in a strange, bittersweet way. Because as much as she still loved him, and she did, deep down, she knew she wasn't the same person who had stood crying in that apartment months ago. She had rebuilt herself from the pieces he left behind. I don't hate you, Aaron, she said softly. I thought I did for a while. But now I hope you find peace. He swallowed hard. What if peace for me is you? She looked away, her throat tightening. Then you'll have to learn that peace doesn't always come from getting what you want. Sometimes it comes from letting go. That silence again. Heavy, fragile, final. He reached into his jacket and pulled out something small, a folded piece of paper. What's that? She asked. He smiled faintly. A list. Remember that thing we used to do? Writing down little things we wanted to do together. She laughed quietly. Yeah, the someday list. I found it the other night, he said. We never got to finish it. He slid it across the table. She unfolded it carefully. Half the items were ticked off. Visit the mountains. Make pancakes at midnight. Read books in the park. Watch fireworks from the roof. And then there were ones that never happened. Adopt a dog. Go to Italy. Renew our vows someday. She traced the last line with her finger. We were really good dreamers, weren't we? He smiled sadly. Yeah, just not great at keeping the dreams alive. They both laughed softly, not because it was funny, but because sometimes laughter was the only way to stop tears. After a moment, she folded the paper and pushed it back to him. Keep it. He frowned. Are you sure? She nodded. Yeah, maybe you'll finish the list someday, even if it's not with me. His eyes glistened, and for a second, it looked like he might cry. But instead, he smiled, the same small, shy smile she felt for that day outside the bookstore. I'll try, he said quietly. They sat there a little longer, talking about everything and nothing. About old memories, new plans, and the strange way time heals some wounds, but leaves others as scars to remind you what love once felt like. When it was finally time to go, he stood up first. She followed, hesitating for a moment before reaching out to hug him. It wasn't the passionate kind of hug they used to share. It was gentle, almost fragile, the kind that says thank you for what we had. He whispered against her hair, I'm sorry for everything. She whispered back, I know. Then she pulled away, smiled through watery eyes, and said, Goodbye, Aaron. He opened his mouth to respond, but she was already turning to leave. As she walked out of the cafe, the bell above the door jingled again. The same sound as the day they met, only this time it felt like the sound of closure. Outside, the sky was beginning to drizzle, just like that first day. She tilted her head up, letting the raindrops touch her face, and for the first time in months, she didn't feel broken. She felt free. Weeks passed. Lily started volunteering at a local library, helping kids read after school. She took long walks in the evenings, learned how to cook new dishes, even started painting again, something she hadn't done since before Aaron. One evening, while closing up the library, she found an old copy of one of their favorite books. Inside, there was a note on the first page in handwriting that wasn't hers. For Lily, I thought maybe one day you'd find this. You once told me that love is like a story. Not all of them have happy endings, but that doesn't make them less beautiful. Thank you for being my favorite chapter. Hey, She smiled through tears. He had found a way to say goodbye one last time. That night, she sat by her window, watching the city lights flicker in the distance, and realized that love wasn't always meant to last forever. Sometimes it was just meant to change you, to make you softer, wiser, stronger. And maybe, someday, she'd fall in love again. But for now, she was content because she had learned how to love herself again first. As she turned off the lamp, a faint smile crossed her lips. "Good night, Aaron," she whispered. And for the first time in a long while, she actually slept peacefully. Subscribe for more heartfelt, real-life stories. There's always another story waiting to heal your heart.